Chapter 26. There was a letter. The Sunday boat had brought it. Dear Nicholas, I thought you were dead. I'm on my own again, more or less. I've been trying to decide whether I want to see you again. The point is, I could. I come through Athens now. I haven't decided whether you aren't such a pig that it's crazy to get involved with you again. I can't forget you, even when I'm with much nicer boys than you'll ever be. Nico, I'm a little bit drunk, and I shall probably tear this up anyway. Well, I may send you a telegram if I can work a few days off at Athens. If I go on like this, you won't want to meet me. You probably don't now, as it is. When I got your letter, I knew you'd just written it because you were bored out there. Isn't it awful I still have to get boozed to write to you? It's raining. I've got the fire on. It's so bloody cold. It's dusk. It's gray. It's so bloody miserable. The wallpaper's mauve, or is it mauve, hell with green plums. You'd be sick all down it. A. Right caravan. Her letter came at the wrongest time. It made me realize that I didn't want to share Burani with anyone. After the first knowledge of the place, and still after the first meeting with Conchis, even as late as the Fowcles incident, I had wanted to talk about it, and to Allison. Now it seemed fortunate that I hadn't, just as it seemed, though still obscurely, fortunate that I hadn't lost my head in other ways when I wrote to her. One doesn't fall in love in 5 seconds, but 5 seconds can set one dreaming of falling in love, especially in a community as unrelievedly masculine as that of the Lord Byron School. The more I thought of that midnight face, the more intelligent and charming it became, and it seemed, too, to have had a breeding, a fastidiousness, a delicacy that attracted me as fatally as the local fishermen's lamps attracted fish on moonless nights. I reminded myself that if Conchis was rich enough to own Modigliani's and Bonnard's, he was rich enough to pick the very best in mistresses. I had to presume some sort of sexual relationship between the girl and him. To do otherwise would have been naive. But for all that there had been something much more daughterly, affectionately protective than sexual in her glance back at him. I must have read Allison's letter a dozen times that Monday, trying to decide what to do about it. I knew it had to be answered, but came to the conclusion that the longer I left it, the better. To stop its silent nagging, I pushed it away in the bottom drawer of my desk, went to bed, thought about Burani, drifted into various romantic sexual fantasies with that enigmatic figure, and failed entirely, in spite of my tiredness, to go to sleep. The crime of syphilis had made me ban sex from my mind for weeks. Now I was found not guilty. Half an hour with the textbook Conchis had given me to look at had convinced me his diagnosis was right. The libido rose strong. I began to think erotically of Allison again, of the dirty weekend pleasures of having her in some Athens hotel bedroom, of birds in the hand being worth more than birds in the bush, and with better motives of her loneliness, her perpetual mixed-up loneliness. The one sentence that had pleased me in the unfastidiousness and not very delicate letter was the last of all, that simple, right caravan, which denied the gaucheness, the lingering resentment in all the rest. I got out of bed and sat in my pajama trousers and wrote a letter, quite a long letter, which I tore up at the first rereading. The second attempt was much shorter and hit off. I thought the right balance between regretful practicality and yet sufficient affection and desire, for her still to want to climb into bed if I got half a chance. I said I was rather tied up at the school over most weekends, though the half-term holiday was the weekend after next, and I might just be in Athens then, but I couldn't be sure. But if I was, it would be fun to see her. I gave him a very expurgated version of the first visit, the week before, and made Conchis and Burani as dull as possible. He sounds as stupid as I thought. No girls? Not a sign. Not even little boys. Nor even a goat? I threw a box of matches at him. Half by dissipience, half by proclivity, he had come to live in a world where the only significant leisure activities were coupling and consuming. His batrachian lips pursed into a smile, and he dug again into the honey. He's asked me over next week again. As a matter of fact, Melly, I wondered, if I do 2 preps for you, would you do mine noon to 6 on Sunday? Sunday duty was easy work. It meant only that one had to stay inside the school and stroll through the grounds a couple of times. Well, yes, I will see. He sucked at the spoon. And tell me what to tell the others if they ask. I want them to think I'm going somewhere else. He thought a moment, waved the spoon, then said, Tell them you're going to Hydra. Hydra was a stop on the way to Athens, though one didn't have to catch the Athens boat to go there, as there were often hikes during the run. It had an embryonic artistic colony of sorts, the kind of place I might plausibly choose to go to. Okay, and you won't tell anyone? He crossed himself. I am as silent as the what is it? Where you ought to be, Melly, the bloody grave. I went to the village several times that week to see if there were any strange faces about. There was no sign of the 3 people I was looking for, although there were a few strange faces. 3 or 4 wives with young children sent out to grass from Athens, and 1 or 2 old couples, dehydrated rentiers, who doddered in and out of the mournful lounges of the Hotel Philadelphia. One evening I felt restless and walked down to the harbor. It was about 11 at night, and the place, with its catalpas and its old black cannon of 1821, was almost deserted. After a Turkish coffee and a cup of brandy in a Kyphinian, I started to walk back. Some way past the hotel, still on the few hundred yards of concrete promenade, I saw a very tall, elderly man standing and bending in the middle of the road, apparently looking for something. He looked up as I approached. He was really remarkably tall and strikingly well dressed for Fowcles, evidently one of the summer visitors. He wore a pale fawn suit, a white gardenia in his buttonhole, an old-fashioned white Panama hat with a black band, and he had a small goatee beard. He was holding by its middle a cane with a meerschaum handle, and he looked gravely distressed, as well as naturally grave. I asked in Greek if he had lost anything. Ah, pardon. Est-ce que vous parlez français, monsieur? I said yes, I spoke some French. It seemed he had just lost the ferrule of his stick. He had heard it drop off and roll away. I struck a few matches and searched round, and after a little while found the small brass end. Ah, très bien. Mille merci, monsieur. He produced a pocketbook, and I thought for a moment he was going to tip me. His face was as gloomy as an El Greco, insufferably bored, decades of boredom, and probably, I decided, insufferably boring. He didn't tip me, but placed the ferrule carefully inside the wallet, and then politely asked me who I was, and fulsomely, where I had learnt such excellent French. We exchanged a few sentences. He himself was here for only a day or 2. He wasn't French, he said, but Belgian. He found Fowcles pittoresque, même moins belle que de l'eau. After a few moments more of this platitudinous chat, we bowed and went our ways. He expressed a hope that we might meet again during the remaining 2 days of his stay and have a longer conversation. But I took very good care that we didn't. At last, Saturday came. I had done the 2 extra duties during the week to clear my Sunday, and was thoroughly exhausted with the school. As soon as the morning lessons were over, and I had snatched a quick lunch, I headed toward the village with my bag. Yes, I told the old man at the gate, a sure method of propagating the lie. I was off to Hydra for the weekend. As soon as I was out of sight of the school, I cut up through the cottages and round the back of the school on to the path to Barani. But I didn't go straight there. I had speculated endlessly during the week about Conchis, and as futilely as endlessly. I thought I could discern two elements in his game, one didactic, the other aesthetic. But whether his cunningly mounted fantasies hid ultimately a wisdom or a lunacy I could not decide. On the whole, I suspected the latter. Mania made more sense than reason. I had also wondered more and more during the week about the little group of cottages at Agia Varvara, the bay east of Barani. It was a wide sweep of shingle with a huge row of athanatos, or agaves, whose bizarre 12-foot candelabra of flowers stood facing the sea. I lay on a time-covered slope above the bay, having come quietly through the trees, and watched the cottages below for any sign of unusual life. But a woman in black was the only person I saw. Now I examined it. It seemed an unlikely place for Conchis' assistants to live. It was so open, so easy to watch. After a while I wound my way down to the cottages. A child in a doorway saw me coming through the olives and called, and then the entire population of the tiny hamlet appeared, 4 women and half a dozen children, unmistakably islanders. With the usual peasant hospitality, they offered me a little saucer of quince jam and a thimbleful of raki, as well as the glass of cistern water I requested. Their men were all off fishing. I said I was going to see O Kyrios Conchis, and their surprise seemed perfectly genuine. Did he ever visit them? Their heads all went back swiftly together, as if the idea was unheard of. I had to listen to the story of the execution again. At least, the oldest woman launched out into a welter of words among which I heard mayor and Germans, and the children raised their arms like guns. Maria, then? They saw her, of course? But no, they never saw her. She is not a Fraxiot, one of them said. Then the music, the songs in the night. They looked at one another. What songs? I was not too surprised. Very probably they went to bed and woke with the sun. And you? Asked the grandmother. Are you a relation of his? They evidently thought of him as a foreigner. I said I was a friend. He has no friends here, said the old woman, and with a faint hostility in her voice she added, Bad men bring bad luck. I said he had guests, a young girl with fair hair, a tall man, a younger girl so high. They had seen them? They had not. Only the grandmother had even been inside Barani, and that was long before the war. Then they had their way and asked me the usual series of childish but charmingly eager questions about myself, about London, about England. I got free in the end, after being presented with a sprig of basil, and walked inland along the bluff until I could climb on to the ridge that led to Barani. For some time 3 of the barefoot children accompanied me along the seldom-used path. We topped a crest among the pines, and the distant flat roof of the house came into sight over the sea of trees ahead. The children stopped, as if the house was a sign that they should go no further. I turned after a while, and they were still wistfully standing there. I waved, but they made no gesture in return.